Hi, I'm Andy Luke, author of Occupied, welcoming you back to the Drone Luke podcast, now also in video form, Spotify and YouTube. SHP Comics advertises as an indie comic book company driven to provide thought-provoking and action-packed titles across several genres. The company was founded last year and in 2022 crowdfunded their first 3 titles over 3 consecutive months. Their most recent, EroTech, was fully funded in 72 hours, selected as a project we love with 6,475 pledged out of the 2,500 goal. So all 3 books are now on sale and meeting with great reviews. On today's podcast, I'm joined by SHP publisher and writer Shawn Hainsworth and Geoffrey Krawczyk, artist on EroTech. Shawn, Geoffrey, welcome to the Drone Look podcast.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having me.
How's your day going? What's your bright spots?
I'm actually getting a lot of stuff done today. It's been very productive. I was sick last week, so I'm playing catch up, but it's been a whirlwind Monday and Tuesday thus far, but a lot of stuff's done. So happy about that.
Yeah. And actually I'm just getting the last page of Woodstake in here. So getting ready to put that issue 2 to press soon. So that's very exciting. It's always great to get that last page in.
So can you tell the audience myself a bit more about yourselves? What are you going back to after this interview? What are your influences and loves as creatives and as business people?
Yeah, do you want to go first, or you want to go first, Jeff?
Yeah, I'm happy to take that. So I guess, when I get done here, it's actually back to work on new stuff with EroTech. I've got working on this short story that we're putting together, kind of the interstitial, if you will, and then getting ready for issue 2. I'm super excited to get started on it. But yeah, other than that, some of my interests and influences, I mean, it just ranges all over the place. I mean, I have a background I started in comics and then moved into fine arts, and then kind of came back to comics. So, I have a love for, offbeat, quirky, I'd say most of the time pretty disturbing. I like the stuff that's a bit weird and out there. So I think that's one of the reasons I was drawn to this project, because it's, it is a bit quirky and offbeat and out there, but also really funny and really fun to draw. So
I was reading you sort of credit Wally Wood and Larry Hama among your influences.
Wally Wood, yeah, definitely Wally Wood. I don't know so much about Larry Hama. Maybe that's from Shawn.
Maybe I got that from Shawn.
Yeah.
No, not me. but now I need to look into it just to make sure.
He could write a mean G.I. Joe. I'll give him that.
Yeah. Yeah. So So I let's see. I make my living doing computer science, artificial intelligence. I'm a geek who sat through a whole lot of Agile tech design meetings. And I think that's where the story for EroTech started to percolate, was just, what would it be like if you had a real tech team, if slightly dysfunctional tech team trying to put together an actual working sex robot, and the humor just sort of started to come from there. But like Geoffrey, I've got a pretty, I'm into kind of the weird and the offbeat. I had more of a cinema background than a comic book background initially. But it's great. We're talking about the new piece, the short story called the SEX 6000. And Geoffrey's in a kind of giallo, Italian style, which, plays right into, I know Dario Argento and all of that. And so, I love that it is kind of a shorthand that we have the same kind of background of the slightly offbeat. I think that's a perfect mood for this short story. So, in short, we're doing a short story, which is going to be sort of a separate story that's going to connect with the larger EroTech story down the road. But it's fun to do something in a slightly different style with a different mood, but that's within the same universe. And I think we'll deliver the same kind of funny, edgy punch that we tried to deliver with EroTech.
So yeah, company making sex robots run by misogynistic men. Samantha is kind of the muscle of the operation. She's overworked and maybe likable. Eric, the bleed tester, who's draws some sympathy for constantly having his dick chewed off by this rampant, badly tested robot. It's a bit of a GitHub, but there are many Gits in it.
Yes, it is. It is a GitHub of Gits. Exactly. I like that.
Yeah, you've drawn to it quite a bit by your sort of background in IT and testing, and I think that's what appealed to me a lot about it. So, I mean, my background is I'm an ex-Presbyterian prude. So when Zach Gooten came to me and says, "Want to read a sex comic and erotica," and my mind went to uncomfortable places, and then I thought, well, why not? And I got into it, and I found that it was reflecting a lot of my experience working out of a hackerspace, makerspace, where a lot of the people are coders, programmers, dev folk, that side of things. And yeah, you've brought a lot of that to the comic, yeah. So why the choice of the sex marketing rather than the tech dev stuff?
Yeah, it's hard. You know, it's my original tagline was that it's like Silicon Valley with sex robots, right? You know, it's really an office comedy. Like the IT crowd. You know, that's the kind of bread and butter of it. The problem is that the first 4 pages are pretty explicit, 17 plus. It's meant to be comic, it's not meant to be erotica, but it's out there. So I wanted to make sure that when people read it, they know what they're getting into. Like if we try to sell it as an office comedy and you open it up and you are in a the full-on testing of a sex robot, you might feel a little duped. So I feel like but it's a hard one to market because we really are not going for erotica, right? This is going for comedy. It's going for edgy, which I think is the best word. I really like that what you mentioned, that Samantha is our protagonist and she's fighting a sea of misogyny in a sex robot company. So there's definitely a lot. I think there's some nice thematic stuff going on. I really want the characters to be well developed. I want you to care about the characters. We're going to develop them a lot over the issues. So this is really dramatic comedy, but once again, when it shows up in your doorstep and you open to that first page, we don't want people to be shocked. So it's a question of trying to represent what it is without misrepresenting it. So it's a little bit tricky, and I would say marketing or that kind of thing is not really my strong suit. So we're just sort of finding our way through.
You anything to add to that, Geoffrey, on what were your thoughts when Shawn pitched you this, and like why did you take it beside your friendship?
I mean, I'm kind of used to doing my own projects, and so I haven't worked with writers a whole lot, and I've sort of dabbled, put feelers out here and there for people to write with, and frankly, it's like you get a lot of stories that are not that great, and Shawn reached out, and I read it and I was shocked. I was like, wow, this is great. This is a great idea, just out of the blue. It wasn't that I was even looking for something. He found me online. And the thing I think that really drew me to it was that it was really character driven. Like it's, the sex is not really the thing that the story hangs on. It's a much different story than that. That just happens to be the setting. But I think I felt that there was a lot of potential for jokes and for visual humor with the premise. And I thought it would be really fun to kind of develop a world around that premise. The idea that, there's something futuristic about it, but also something very contemporary about it. So I think it's the opportunity to really play around a bit around with the medium.
Yeah, and I have to say, now that I've got the physical copy, and I need to send you a bunch of physical copies so you have them. It's just a pleasure to open it up and actually leaf through it as opposed to looking at it on the computer screen. And I just more and more, the more I look at it, just appreciate a lot of Jeff's work. Because it is, we both kind of share Mad Magazine in our background. It can be quite difficult to capture the joke properly and visually with the right tone. And I think he just nails it in a lot of ways. And so that's what's great is, I do think it requires a lot of work to get that joke right, to make it land right. And when we were going over the sketches, we were talking about, kind of one joke per panel, not trying to pack too much in, trying to make sure that that it was set off and that it paid off, not just in terms of the words, but visually. And so I think that's the fun of this one is, there's a lot of humor implicit in the setup of a sex robot gone wrong. But when you get down to the details of it, we're both kind of about, getting the craft of it right, the timing of it right, the perspective of it right, the dialogue just right to work. And that's what's been a real pleasure working with Geoffrey is getting that right, and going back and forth on it. So I look forward to doing that again. And yeah, like this is going to be a fun little short story, and but I'm already noodling away on issue 2 of EroTech, and that's gonna be probably early next year. We get into that one seriously.
I hope we can get, because we now have video, I'm hoping we can get a few of Geoffrey's graphics up, but yeah, so we need to pause and talk about those. For me, that sort of evokes that uncluttered, clear dynamics of Jamie McKelvey or Frank Whiteley doing watercolor.
Thanks.
So I've got, I was reading an interview you did with Monkeys Fighting Robots. And you said, I tried to design a world that felt like a contemporary office space, but with just a hint of futurism. The throwback 64 color palette and halftone with modern digital tools also is a big part of that. Oh, and then the question is, Geoffrey, what drew you to that project? So well done, Geoffrey.
Thanks. I mean, Frank Whiteley, that's high praise. I appreciate that. Yeah, I mean, I'm really drawn towards the retro look, and not so much even just the retro look, but like a really kind of creating a very authentic simulacrum. Like I want it to look like an old comic, but I think the material kind of has this it has this call for having something new and futuristic and technological about it, right? So I wanted to really marry those two things together so that you have a bit of this kind of almost Silver Age humor visually, the style, not just like Silver Age comics, but also something like Mad Men and kind of this, pastiche of the 50s office place or of office places, or even of say 60s or 70s sitcoms. But with the digital tools and the ability to sort of manipulate what would have been restrictions back then, you can really push the envelope with what's possible visually. And so I had a lot of fun sort of playing with what's possible within sort of the parameters of, okay, we know we want to color with halftone dots, and we know we want to use this palette, but how can we update it a bit so it has a futuristic feel? And really the hope is that it seems a bit timeless because of that.
Yeah, it's got that yeah, Mad Men is a very good comparison, and also that sort of married with like open plan spacing and big areas that you've seen a lot of companies nowadays. Mm-hmm. Yeah, one of the things I was thinking of, there's parallels with Silicon Valley, but also Mythic Quest. Don't know if you're fans of that. In that,
I haven't yet seen it, but I'm a big fan of McElhaney and the boys from Always Sunny, but I haven't seen Mythic Quest yet.
Oh yeah,
I haven't seen it yet either.
I'm a #1 fan. Their podcast's very fantastic also.
Yeah, it's great.
Shawn, I'd love to hear a little bit about how that sort of business experience of coming from that environment feeds into the script. I know you've been asked this before, but you, Marie.
Yeah, no, of course. Yeah, I think anyone who's worked in a corporate environment, you just kind of get used to that slightly surreal world of things that are kind of ridiculous and procedural, and that you kind of half-heartedly go through because it's expected. I don't know, it's funny, like when I started working in an office, it was back in like the late 80s, and it was a law firm, and I had to wear like a a button-down shirt and everything, and which I didn't like at all. And they were just introducing dress down Fridays. That was like a big deal in the 80s. And there was all this conversation about, can we allow people to dress down one day a week? And, and the partners would walk around in like their full 3-piece suits and everything. And I think like a lot of people who don't really buy into that, that sort of corporate mentality, you always feel like you're doing this weird dance. You feel like a bit of an imposter, and all of the rituals of being in the office are just kind of odd, but you have to go along with them. And that comes down to office politics too. Like so much, I mean, I was always the person who's just trying to get something done, right? Like, let's solve this problem. Let's just make this thing work. But of course you can't do that because this person in that department, wants to do it using these tools because they're in, a turf war with someone else who's trying to use these tools, all the nonsense that goes on. And so, yeah, I think I have a really good sense of that, like what it's like to be, because as a technologist, you're the ultimate problem solver, right? You're trying to just, and the problems are complex. There's so many little bugs and errors and things that come up. It's so hard to wrangle a software project, particularly in the old days when we were wrangling them with fewer people and fewer tools to do it properly. And so, yeah, there's definitely, sorry, this is a long answer, but yeah, there's definitely a lot that goes into being a technologist or a problem solver in that kind of environment where you don't really fit in. And your best, and after a while you realize your best efforts are never going to be rewarded. And you only have so much control over how things are actually made or get done, that at a certain point you just kind of go along for the ride because it's a paycheck. Even though I really enjoy the technology, I always have. I've always been kind of a geek. I was like, I had an Atari 800 I saved up for with my lawnmower money, one of the early, PCs, and I, was writing video games in BASIC, back in the 80s, and all that kind of stuff. So I do love the technology. I love the space, but I have a strange relationship with corporate America.
I think what you described there is you see that in the experience of Steve, the tester, who's in the Jimmy McNulty wave at the breathing machine for his dick. And, this could be a fantastic opportunity, regular orgasms, but general pain. And Samantha, who is in a semi-managerial role, but is constantly just beset and beleaguered and forced to compromise when she knows better that's going to cost stuff. So there's a lot of social commentary in there. There's gender and workspace politics and pay grades and power structures and inequalities. There's a whole kind of feminist thing coming through as well, I think.
I'm glad you mentioned all of that, because that's all very much in there. And that's, that's what I think is the guts of it thematically. And that's what makes it go, right? And that's what's going to give it longevity. Yeah, I'm really, yeah. So the writer in me says, thank you for mentioning all of those things.
Shawn and Geoffrey, you headed off fairly quickly. You said there, and I imagine the scripts and arts going back and forth with these, and maybe with generating input on one another's work. Can you give me a sort of a behind the scenes on EroTech 1 and 2 and the new short? What's your sort of working process? What's going on back there?
You want to start off on that one?
Yeah, I can take that. So, I mean, Shawn came to me with a pretty fully formed script, even laid out down to the panel. But, one of the nice things about working with him is that he came to me and sort of really gave me free rein and said, this is, I've sort of laid this out the way I saw it, but feel free to take it apart, rearrange, figure out how the panel structure, how the storytelling should go. And so I felt a lot of freedom to kind of take the script and, manipulate it a bit so that it fit, maybe the jokes work a bit better this way, or this panel needs to be this, or we need a big splash payoff here. And so there was a lot of freedom to really make the storytelling my own. And so, he gave me the script, and then I devise a sort of thumbnail rough with the script, the page dialogue and text on one side, and then I do the thumbnails on the other. excuse me. And then from there, I move into roughs that I then give to him. And I think that's really the area where we kind of look for areas where we can add in jokes or punch up jokes. And that's sort of also the area where, you know, you mentioned Wally Wood. I think that's one of the things that I'm trying to do with it visually as well, is populate the world and make it feel real with people in it, but also use that population to really cram in visual humor so that there's things going on in the background and it invites a second reading. So that's the stage. The rough stage is where, you know, sort of we kind of break down how the storytelling works and then where we can add in and punch up some of the funny and some of the visual humor. And then from there, it's just kind of it moves on into the pencils and inks. And I think once I've got sort of a final penciled stage, then we can sort of start to look at the dialogue. And then I think we went through another pass with the dialogue once it was all kind of put together. And then from there, it's just sort of like a final bit of polish and putting the whole thing together. But I think there's a lot of back and forth and a lot of sort of trimming and manipulation with the dialogue and the jokes right up until the very end. We were sort of making determinations on jokes there too. So really collaboration from start to finish.
A real multi-draft process.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it's been great to have a collaborator like that. You know, I mean, I think we kind of hit a level of trust pretty early, and I don't think there's any ego clashes. So it's been really fun, like, because he takes it and, you know, there's nothing better than having someone take a script and push it in a direction or visualize it in a way that you hadn't imagined. And then you get to respond to that. So it's been really great. Yeah, it is that whole process. And then when we finally got to it, then he disappeared and did the inks and the coloring and everything. And the colors are fantastic, right? I mean, I had no input over that simply because, you know, that's his thing. I mean, I can, you know, give him a stupid opinion, but he really took it from there and finished it off, and it's, no pun intended, and it's just beautiful.
I've been working on a 5.5 months into a radio play with another writer, and just that level of close contact collaboration, it kind of makes that sort of 12 draft drab sparkle and exciting, because you never know what you're always discovering something new, and that's really fantastic. And to just sort of birth something together properly, intimately.
Yeah, I agree. It's great to have like I said, just someone you trust and you don't have ego clashes with, it can, and who brings something that you don't bring, right? So I think, you know, kind of artist writer, you know, in a way we come with a different set of skills, so we complement each other in a good way. So yeah, it's been really fun.
What's the structure of the series going ahead? I presume issue 1 begins like a multi-part story, but you've told other interviewers it might keep going until we feel we're done. Do you have an idea of that narrative structure going ahead? I'm sure there's ideas back and forth.
Yeah, you know, this one is interesting because it's a big world, and we could play around with it a lot. So I think the structure of this, so just briefly, I wrote this as a novel like 3 or 4 years ago, about 180 pages or so, plus about a 18,000 word short story, which is the basis for the new one, the SEX 6000. So, and that was really focused on a complete arc through the launch of the new model 6000. So that's kind of the story arc that takes us through as, you know, Samantha's first, you know, management project, this new robot, you know, and that gives us a beginning, a middle, and an end for this story arc. But I think the world that we're in, we can take it in a lot of different directions. You know, one of the things we're talking about, and I've been thinking about a lot, is you know, you don't want to give the impression that there's only 6 people or 8 people who work in this company, right? The people that are in your comic book. There is this larger corporate structure going on. And so, you know, I'm trying to already, you know, bring us out of just that office universe that we developed in issue 1, right? Each issue should take you somewhere new. You know, visually, we got to expand the world. It should take you deeper into the characters. We're going to introduce a new character in issue 2, while contributing to that overall narrative. So I think we'll get, I'm thinking that's going to be about 5 issues till we round off that that story. That'll kind of be book one of EroTech. And then I think there's a lot of places we can go with it if we still have, the energy to do so. But as a team, like I wouldn't do this with anyone else at this point. So we both have to be into it. We both have to want to, like the next idea and want to keep going with it. But I think, we're through EroTech 1 through 5. I hope that first arc, that first complete narrative, that we're good for that, and then we'll see what happens.
Get there and see how it goes, Geoffrey.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the thing I would say about that is I think it's exactly right. As I was saying, I want to make sure that the world feels, as real as possible, as real as you can in this sort of, pop art, hypercolor future, Looney Tunes future I've got going on. But I think it's really important. It was really important to me because the characterization is so strong in the script. As I said, it's really an ensemble comedy. It's not really about sex or, a porn comic. It's really about the characters. And so it was really important to make sure that the characters are all really distinct, not just in their voice, but visually, it could be that if you have an office comedy where you're in a sort of drab corporate environment, it just turns into a wall of gray, even the people, right? So you have to make sure that visually, the way that the body language and everything is very different. And I think that's the great thing, is that it is such an ensemble that there's lots of potential to really delve into even more characterizations. And the hope is that, it's the possibility of, this background character that we saw before. Well, heck, there's a whole story there that we haven't even, explored yet that we could run with after this main arc is over. I think there's a lot of potential to really sort of delve into this larger world, because as he said, any real company that's in this position is not just going to have 5 people working in it. There's tons of people working in it. Maybe they have other offices around the world, or maybe they have franchises or repair shops somewhere, sales floors. So there's just really a lot of potential to expand it and a lot of room to play. I would say even in terms of genre too. As he said, we're going to do this sort of like side quest, if you will. And, it's a completely different style because it sort of lends itself to a different way to look at the universe that we've built. And I think, there's lots of different ways we can play with even genre within the universe as well. So that's very exciting.
Yeah, and I have to say, this is something about comic books that's marvelous. Like you don't get in any other art form. You certainly don't get in movies or novels or, whatever, is that you can do a short story and it can have a totally different visual style and still fit in the universe. You look at Matt Wagner's, Grendel, or something where just every artist is coming in and adding a different style and is collectively creating this big story. So, I really, I just like the idea that this short story that we're doing is going to have a very different style. And I just think there's a lot of fun to be had in here. And a lot of different stories to tell. And so I think as long as we are both, got the energy for it and feel like it's fun to work on, and we're doing something, right? Nobody wants to get repetitive and be like, cranking out EroTech 25 because we feel like we have to, right? Even though the idea is tired and whatever. Yeah, actually, I have to say I think one of Jeff's big contributions to the first issue that I appreciate more and more now is there's a scene in the very beginning, in the very middle, where Samantha is checking the numbers on the warehouse, and that was originally done at her desk in the office. And Jeff moved us out of the office because we really wanted to get out of the office to Samantha's apartment where she's drinking wine and sitting on the couch and doing this. And so many people commented on that scene. They want to know what kind of wine that she drinks. It brings them into a more intimate relationship with her. And so that for me was a lesson too about the power of just shifting space, shifting the visual style, shifting the storytelling a little bit. And you can really do that in comic books. You can't really imagine like a Game of Thrones short story done in a totally different style, right? Who would do it? Who would produce it? Who would
like a slapstick Game of Thrones.
Like a slapstick Game of Thrones or something.
The musical episode.
Yeah, exactly. But in comic books, you have the kind of freedom to just kind of go and be wacky somewhere else. And it's kind of a collector mentality. People like that stuff, right? Like they want to go get the oddball piece. you know, the limited edition weirdo. Yeah, I like the world for that reason, because it encourages that kind of creativity.
Because a lot of EroTech is kind of a business theme. Well, you mentioned that. How did I put it? Tech dev, programming, coding, agile, testing, workflow cycles. I want to talk about business, and Geoffrey, you've got to shoot on at some point. So rather than how do you make comics, I want to ask about the business of being a creative. What's been of help to you in turning your talent into a harnessable trading commodity? Resources, mentors, favorite tax forms?
Yeah,
Zero
right.
favorite tax
Yeah,
form. Zero.
yeah. You know, I think, well, look, I've done a lot of different creative things in terms of making a living. I've always had a through line that I've always had a day job, but I've always, you know, that's been graphic design and creative direction. So it's always had a hand in the creative field. So I've been very fortunate in that, you know, even the stuff that I do, that's more of a passion project, the illustration and the comics, I still get to do something somewhat creative for my day job. So I've been very fortunate that way. So my first lesson to all budding creatives out there is find a day job that's not too horrible. It really makes it so that you know, I think there's something to be said for, you know, toiling away in a dish room so that you really are motivated to go and work. But at the same time, if you're going to be creative, you have to be very adaptable. You have to be very sort of quick to be able to pivot and wear a lot of hats. And so I think it's really important that you not split your energy so far between, you know, what needs to pay the bills and what your passions are. You know, if you can sort of find a balance creatively in those two things, that's the best. When I taught at university, I always told my students, you know, a great skill to learn is screen printing, because anywhere you go in the world, people need shirts. And if you learn how to print those shirts, it's not, you know, the most creative endeavor in the world, but it's somewhat creative. It's related to creative, and there's the potential there to do creative things within it. But it's a great side gig, side hustle to be able to fund your other passions. So being able to sort of find a balance and keep a little bit of creative in what you're doing to pay the bills is very valuable, I've found.
Yeah, there are really great jobs out there, jobs you will enjoy doing and will put food on the table, keep the lights on. So yeah, that's very important. Very great advice. Who has what was your journey up through art college and
Yeah, my father was an illustrator and cartoonist, and so again, I was very fortunate to have very supportive parents. You know, I grew up surrounded by an art library, essentially, so I was reading comics and cartoons from a very young age, drawing cartoons from a very young age. I mean, basically, I came out of the womb with a pencil in my hand, essentially, and then, you know, I grew up in the 90s boom of the collecting, you know, comics boom and explosion and then bust. And right about the time it went bust, I kind of got out of comics and I went to art school and did my master's and had a fairly decent art career for a while, but became a little bit disenchanted, was a little bit antsy to try something a little bit different. And it occurred to me that, you know, one of the things that drew me to comics in the first place was its versatility as a medium. You can really do anything you want in comics. And in a lot of ways, I think, you know, I dealt with subjects in my fine art work, in my painting and performance work that was challenging, and I wanted to be somewhat transgressive and somewhat subversive. But really, I think that at the end of the day, there is the ability for comics to be possibly one of the most subversive and transgressive mediums out there. There's a lot of things that would get you, you know, kicked out of a lot of places if you tried to do it, or would cause great controversy that are pale in the fine art space, in the public space, that pale in comparison to some of the things being done in comics. You know, the fact that the only artist that I know of in the past 30 to 40 years that's been actually censored and barred from drawing comics because of the content of his work was making comics, not, you know, for any artwork, painting that anyone did. So I think there's a lot of potential there for comics to possibly be the ultimate transgressive medium, artistic medium. So that's really my circuitous route back to comics after 20 years.
But that's what I like about comics too, is that's that history of and comics were never taken seriously. So, you know, the alternative, you know, comics authors of the 60s and 70s, you know, just selling stuff in head shops and whatever without any kind of, you know, code authority. They could do whatever they wanted, you know, and get away with it. And it wasn't taken all that seriously. You know, it's interesting because, you know, I remember, and we could go on, and this is probably too off topic, but, you know, when the hammer started to come down on certain artists like Robert Mapplethorpe in the 80s and other things that happened, you know, comics was in a different place. But I agree that because comics are kind of overlooked and undervalued as a serious art form or a serious contribution, it does give you a lot more space to push the envelope.
Yeah, there's definitely seems to be a sort of a parallel with sort of incendiary reactions. I think of those sort of 60s, 70s stuff coming out of obviously the whole Worth and McCarthy era, and then you get a lot of the 80s stuff, the big regarded sort of Watchmen, Mouse, Dark Knight stuff had left quite an impact on the cultural landscape.
Yeah, those are my comics. Those are the things that drew me. That's what pulled me into comics, were those things.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Yep. So Geoffrey's got to leave us now. Thanks very much for joining us.
Absolutely, it was a pleasure. Really fun to talk, and really fun to talk comics and influences and EroTech. And I'm looking forward to getting the book into everybody's hands. It looks like people are really thrilled with it, so that's very exciting. And looking forward to getting more of the story out there. So stay tuned.
Cool. Thanks very much. So, Shawn, I want to talk about your other books. Woodstake is a blood and comedy ride of vampires at the Immortal Woodstock Festival. Philippe Kroll's art on it is effing gorgeous, is it not?
Effing gorgeous, and it gets better every issue. Issue 2 is double effing gorgeous. He's really working hard, and we're doing a lot of research on the festival. He's been like watching the Woodstock documentary on Rewind, getting the details right. It's going to be really great.
It was initially a movie because your background is in documentary filmmaking as well as other things.
Well, I originally wrote Woodstake as a screenplay, nothing documentary. I was referring to the documentary of the 1969 festival, the Woodstock documentary. And just,
but I IMDb'd you.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yes. No. So I started off in documentary film, and I made 5 documentary features back in the 90s, before it became a little untenable financially. And then and that's when I started diving into the computer stuff seriously. So sorry, I misunderstood the question.
I think I remember watching the Woodstock Festival when I was about 15, and I'd been invited to, because I was a wallflower, I didn't get to go to many parties. But there I saw Hendrix playing guitar with his teeth. Is this the same festival I'm thinking of?
You know what? I should know the answer to that question. I don't know if Hendrix plays the guitar with his teeth at Woodstock. I cannot answer that question. But certainly
made that bit up.
Yeah, he closed the festival off, and very famously played the Star Spangled Banner. And actually, Hendrix will feature in Woodstock because in the plot of Woodstock, because he's so iconic, and because he closed off the festival. So stay tuned.
Yeah, such a performance. It just imprinted on me.
Yeah, it really is. And just to take the Star Spangled Banner and make it his own, and to redefine it for another generation, particularly when there was so much conflict over the Vietnam War and the meaning of patriotism and symbols like the flag, and the national anthem. I think it's hard for people who, now I was born in 66, so that was not my generation. I was like child of the 70s, but for people of that generation, to understand what it meant for Hendrix to come out and redefine the Star Spangled Banner at that moment at this iconic festival. It was just a huge deal.
Incredible. Yeah. So back to hippies, vampires, pop culture icons, blood, and comedy. Woodstake is a couple issues.
Actually, Woodstake is going to be 2 books of 7 issues. It's a big story. So there's Woodstake, which is the first one, which is that screenplay that I wrote that I think is going to come in at 7 issues, may come in at 6 issues. So we're wrapping up issue 2 now. We're diving right into issue 3. I'm hoping to be through issue 6 by next year, like 1 a quarter, maybe issue 7. So I'm hoping the whole Woodstake story is wrapped up by the end of next year. And then the sequel, of course, is Woodstake 99, the 30th anniversary of Woodstake, which was a very different festival in every way, shape, and form. But the story is going to continue and wrap up in Woodstake 99. So it's planned as a 2-part.
Okay, wow.
Yeah.
The sequel ability of vampires if they survive.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And I really love the main character of Woodstake, and I'm looking forward to she's going to be sort of the only character that goes really strongly through both series. So, but I'm thoroughly enjoying writing her as a character, and I don't want to give too much away, but she's going to be the major character through line to the next one, other than the vampire.
The other book is The Killing Machine. Was this the first?
Yes.
Series? Yeah.
The Killing Machine I did the first Kickstarter on. Honestly, that was because I had The Killing Machine. The Killing Machine was written in a couple different forms. It was written as like a 90-page pilot initially, because it wasn't quite 2 hours. And I knew it was a big story. So I kind of did that one initially. So I had Woodstake and The Killing Machine ready to go when I decided I want to make comic books. The heck with screenplays. I want to actually make these things come to life. And so I went out and found Philippe and Michel Fortin, the artist who does The Killing Machine. And it took a while to get going with Philippe. He had a lot of other things going on and blah, blah, blah. So Killing Machine came out first. But yeah, that's going to be, it's a big story. It's going to be a 5-issue book 1. That one's all plotted out. And then there will be a book 2, which is somewhat plotted out. The thing about The Killing Machine is it's going to take like 3 issues before it really starts to play its hand, because it is a big story. But the simple concept behind it, the Killing Machine is the book 1 of the whole series, is called The Hand of God. And the idea is that, what if we found some kind of object, and we find some kind of object deep under the ocean that seems to be responsible for the chemical building blocks of life on Earth. So seems to have been responsible for seeding life on Earth. And so how people understand this object, try to control access to this object, and where this object leads humanity, which eventually will lead us into contact with 2 other races with similar objects. So were these objects placed by some alien force? Were they, random spores floating in the galaxy? Was there some kind of divine intervention? Why are these 3 races linked? There's a lot going on there, but that's kind of the big picture. And then, the short picture is, sort of our initial encounters with the first alien race that this leads us to. So yeah, big epic, space opera. Once again, I hope really good characters. I really try to focus on my characters, and hopefully one that will over time become like, wow, that's freaking cool. Like, I really like the ideas behind this, as well as just kind of the fun and the characters and the action.
Yep. So I really like The Killing Machine. We've got artist Michael Fortin on it, and he really put some hard labor into this sort of science fiction and technical design to epic results. I think you used the word epic yourself, but it's kind of clear to see looking at the comic. The characters are layered, and it is right away as well. You mentioned the full firm novel-like narrative. You totally get that from issue 1. I don't have, it says here I don't really have a question about that, and I don't. Yeah, it's really good. Go and buy it.
Yeah, and I think issue 2 is going to take the next big step forward. We're going to introduce issue 2 is called The Hand of God. So we're going to introduce the object known as the Hand of God. And yeah, the problem with the Killing Machine is that Michel is so detailed. He takes a long time, right? But you should see the work that goes into this. I mean, he does these sketches, we get everything just so, and then his inks, I sent out, to followers, one of the inked pages he does. I mean, just the detail and the hatching and the inking and the shading and what goes, and not to mention the kind of technology design, because we're in the year 2073 and he's designing computers and underwater, spaceship, or underwater bathyspheres and spaceships, and and then on top of all of that, he does like 80 layers in Photoshop building up the colors, right? So he does kind of washes, then he does highlights, then he does this and he does that. He sent me one of his files. It's massive. It's like so many layers, and he's just in there doing it. So it's great art, but it's very time consuming. So I'm thinking the Killing Machine probably is going to be one issue every 6 months, which means we'll get through the 5-issue first story by the middle of 2024. But wait for it, because it's going to be a good story. It's got a great cliffhanger. I think people will enjoy this one. It's just a slower burn.
Yeah, I'm just thinking what I could compare it to, maybe stuff like Babylon 5, The Expanse, Philip K. Dick's novels. How do you draw from in the science fiction tradition?
Yeah, so I love Philip K. Dick. I love conceptual stuff. Actually, I read a lot of Ted Chiang now. I think Ted Chiang is marvelous in terms of, conceptual science fiction. I would say the biggest influence on this would probably be Arthur C. Clarke in 2001. I was really, so as a film buff, I, of course, watched the Kubrick movie over and over and loved the Kubrick movie. But when I went and read the novel is so marvelous, and there's so many great ideas in there. And the thing about Kubrick is that he discards so much of the novel in favor of his visual, storytelling, which is phenomenal. But the idea that there are these kind of black obelisks, and they lead us on a journey of exploring our own evolution. So I would say that's probably the thing that's at the core of this, because this is really about an object that we discover that leads us on a journey into understanding the nature of human life and of life in the universe. And so that was probably the biggest influence. But I read a lot of sci-fi, Robert Heinlein, a lot of the classic sci-fi. There's actually a guy who lives in my area named Alan Steele. He lives like 20 minutes from me, who wrote the Coyote series, which is a series of science fiction novels about colonizing, when humanity colonizes another planet, that are just marvelous. So yeah, I love thoughtful sci-fi. Like that's what science fiction is to me, is it's great storytelling and characters where you can ask the big questions and you can shoot the works on philosophy and all of that. And that's why I love it.
So I mentioned earlier Zach Gooten, who I got an email from pitching this interview, which I'm so glad you guys have been able to join me for. And I was reading a bit about, so I didn't see Zach's name in any of the credits. And I was also reading a bit about the Divergent Media Group, who you're partnered with. Can you tell us a bit more about Zach and the other people around what you are doing and Divergent?
Yeah, so I'm number one, I'm busy just because I have my computer programming day job. I've got 2 teenage children, and I'm trying to start this comic book company and produce 3 series. And I know what I'm good at, and I know what I'm not good at. I'm not good at marketing. It's not what I do. And so the first thing I did before I ran my first Kickstarter was say, I need somebody to help me market this thing. I've never done a Kickstarter before. I don't know how to do a Kickstarter. And so I found a company called Inked Marketing, and one of their kind of spin-off companies is Divergent Media. And so they do the video. There's a video trailer for the Kickstarter. They put that together. They have the finished comic book. They do a lot of pan and scan. They add music, and they make kind of a cool trailer for me. They also one of the great things about Inked is there's a lot of comic book creators that go through Inked, and we often offer our PDFs as stretch goals to other Kickstarters, so that within the Inked family, we're sharing books, right? So readers of my book can get free PDFs as stretch goals from, last time we had Justin Gray, but other artists that work for Inked, and they also do Facebook marketing and that kind of thing. So they really helped me get off the ground. Like my first Kickstarter was a success for two reasons. One would be Inked marketing, the other one was my family and friends, right? So who saved me on that one. But where I went from the first Kickstarter to the EroTech Kickstarter was a huge leap. There was only 45 backers of the Killing Machine. There was 190 for EroTech. I think a lot of that's marketing. So Zach has a company called Think Alike, and they're a marketing company. And it was just the kind of thing where I was like, I don't have time to identify podcasts and reach out to people and do follow-up emails. And it's just not what I do. And that's what he does. What they do is they run email marketing campaigns that are business to business. So here's the first email, and then he's got open rates, and he compares subject lines, and he compares click-through rates, and then follow-up emails, and they do all of that. And what I get is, you've got a podcast, with this person, just set up the date, and it's great because I don't have to do any of that. So these are really marketing partners so that I can focus on what I do, which is, write and work with the artists. I try to spend as much time as I can doing what's fun. But there's a whole bunch of stuff that's not fun, but as much as possible, I try to push off marketing and all that other stuff to other people as much as I can.
Because there's other people that are just better at it than you.
Yeah,
that's what they've been focusing on, and I know the exact same thing of being so focused on the creative, and then I'm singing to a room with one man, one dog, and it's kind of not worth the sort of months of work I've been putting into it. As a metaphor, I'm not a great singer. I can do Moon River. So get those people around you. That's really important. Pay for it. They're worth it. They're bringing in the audience, and make it a community thing. I've just launched a new podcast with my friend PJ Hart. It's called I've Never Read Discworld. I'm the Never Read Discworld. PJ has read them all. And it's just been myself sort of tweeting a lot of Pratchett fans, Discworld communities, and you know what? They have totally embraced us. They've been just utterly fantastic, and I feel really got that sort of warm welcome. So it's important to have that tone, that atmosphere around you, bring in your family and friends, bring in people who know how to do the marketing and will project your signal that extra miles, thousands of miles.
Yeah, and for me, what I'm really focused on is developing these stories as my intellectual property, right? Like, I think I have really good, I think The Killing Machine, I think Woodstake, I think EroTech are good stories, but it's going to take 3+ years to tell them. And so I'm not like the last chunk of money we got from Kickstarter was immediately turned around and put into these marketing companies and other thing. I'm not looking to make a dime right now. I'm just looking to sustain as much as I can so that I can tell these stories and in a complete form. And at that point, I'm hoping people say, wow, this is a great story, and then it will have value. But to have an issue 1 is hard, right? There's so many comics out there. People are, yeah, that was cool. But until you can really tell that whole first story, that 5-issue Killing Machine, that 7-issue Woodstake, it's hard to really have something of value. So that's what I do is I turn around, I put it right back into, their marketing for the next Kickstarter.
So you've mentioned their Inked marketing, Divergent Media, Think Alike. If you don't know these people, ask people about other people, just reach out. The radio play I'm producing, we're in talks with a fairly big production company, which we had we're first timers. We were pretty sure we wouldn't get this far. It pays to reach out. So
That's
Yeah.
great. Congratulations. I actually, I did a lot of theater in college, and I was always taken with how many English playwrights developed themselves writing radio plays for the BBC. Because that was not really, there's a long, I mean, the English seem to have held on to the idea of radio dramas well past the point when America when television came in, the radio play died. But in England, they keep going. I've listened to some great productions, and so many playwrights that I know learned their craft writing radio plays. It's a great thing. I mean, we're now back to it with the podcast, right? The podcast has all of a sudden reinvigorated all of this, but I think it's a great way to hone your craft as a writer. And particularly, it makes it even harder when you've got no visuals. You've got to do it all with your dialogue or whatever additional text you put in there. So I tip my hat to you. I think that's really great, and congratulations.
Thanks. Yeah, that shocked me too, just how dead radio plays are outside Britain and to some extent in Ireland. But it's all been resurrected through podcasts, and there's some wonderful stuff going on there. It's just about finding business and creative partners and then audience partners.
Yeah, finding your tribe. Like that's and that's part of what Kickstarter is for me too. It's not just, the people who are willing to give you money for your comic book and come back for the next campaign, that's a fan. And you cannot put a high enough value on a fan who actually really likes your work and will come back for more. And so Kickstarter is a good way for me to find them. But however you find them, like, your tribe's out there, but it's you got to find them.
One of the ways you guys have, or maybe one of your partners have helped push that SHP Comics signal is through the merch on shpcomics.com. You can buy comics, fine art prints, alternative covers, tees, caps, mags, and mouse mats, which are perfect for that code dev environment. It's really diversity.
Yeah, that just struck me. I guess the business side of my brain, I'm like, I have all this amazing art, right? And so nowadays there are companies, like in the old days, you would have to, pay for that merchandise and stick it in a warehouse, and the startup costs would be, impossible. But now there are places with print on demand. I mean, I was just able to go in and take great art from the comic books and say, put it on a t-shirt. And they'll print it in any size and mail it out into the world. Now, the margins are small, right? I mean, I'll make like $2 on a t-shirt or $3 on a t-shirt. But for me, once again, it's just getting the brand out there, right? It's like, if you like the comic and you're an Agile guy and you've got a coffee mug or a t-shirt that makes you happy, that's all part of the experience. And it was a low barrier to entry, right? I could just go in, load up my designs. I use a company called Printful, and they do print on demand. They do worldwide print on demand. So you can get this in Europe, you can get it in Australia, and without crazy shipping costs. So, once again, it's not a huge cash, it doesn't make a lot of money because the margins are small on print on demand, but it's great. Like, yeah, go grab a mug, right?
Sure, you're providing something for your fans, and they're paying you to advertise for them. So everybody wins.
And if someone's willing to fork over their hard-earned cash for a t-shirt, that means they really like it. And that's what you want. You want to find the people who like your stuff, like I was saying, and that's just another way of doing it. Like, if someone wants to wear your something from your comic book on their t-shirt, then that's awesome, right?
And that's word of mouth. It's being seen. That's, somebody asks, what's that mouse mat? There's a conversation there, and that firsthand, reportage that's infectious. I think. Almost it for questions. You mentioned something about a Kickstarter.
Yes. So the next Kickstarter, the last Kickstarter of the year, is called Aliens, Vampires, and Sex Robots: The Stories Continue. So I've got issue 2 of The Killing Machine, long anticipated. Issue 2 of Woodstake, which is just gorgeous, and they get to the festival, and the way Philippe has rendered the festival is fantastic. And the EroTech short story we talked about. So I got 3 new books. You can only get them on Kickstarter. They won't be on SHP Comics until next year. Some of the add-ons are some of the things we mentioned, the mouse mats and the mugs and the t-shirts. You can get us add-ons. We're going to try to get everything out by Christmas. And yeah, so you can get like the SHP bundle of all digital. So if you just want the digital comics, you can get them. And what we're doing with the Killing Machine and Woodstake is we're providing, 56-page, versions with issue 1 and 2 put together with a special variant cover. So we're trying to make some really, good stuff. If you have issue 1, you can just buy issue 2. If you don't, you can get the collected edition. You can get it digitally. But the stories continue. So we're excited. That launches on October 4th.
October 4th. Great. I'll calendar that for myself because I love this thing in Kickstarters where if you've missed the boat that I did of the first 3, you can go in and often you will get back issues bundled up, and that's really helpful to have that jump on spot.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
So
you can buy just issue 2 or 1 and 2.
Excited.
Yeah.
So was there anything else, Shawn, you wanted to mention about the business?
No, I think that's good. I think we talked about everything. It's been really fun to talk to you. I just love talking to fellow fans. It's always great to just I think I really enjoyed hearing your opinions about all kinds of things, and especially your thoughts on our comic books. It's just great to hear that people are out there and reading it and like it and get it, and just to explore what you like. So no, it's been really fun. And we got the Geoffrey K, which we don't always get. And he's just terrific. So yeah, this has been fun.
Fortunate Mercurial Mind.
Yeah.
So shpcomics.com, or also on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. And you're on Twitter as well, Shawn, as yourself?
Yeah, and so it's SHP Comics everywhere except for Twitter. It's SHP_comics. And we're a little pathetic on Twitter. We've got like 40 followers, so we haven't managed to kind of crack the Twitter nut yet, but we're out there. But mostly the posts go to all the channels. So the same, not always the same thing, but similar content will go to Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter.
Cool. SHP_comics on Twitter.
Yep.
SHP_comics on Twitter. SHP_comics on Twitter.
Let's break 50 followers.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks very much, Shawn. It's been a real pleasure.
Yeah. Thank you. Have a great rest of your night.
I'm looking forward to the rest of the book. Cheers. If you've enjoyed this episode of the Drone Look podcast, please check out our archives. There's a collection of audio essays, essentially, on everything from Mutant Enemy, Baywatch Nights, Always Sunny, The Shield, The New Universe, Justice League, and Transformers comics by James Roberts, Stephen Moffat's Press Gang. We're pretty big, some pretty broad coverage. This podcast is made possible by my patrons on patreon.com/Andy Luke, where every month I share commentaries, exclusive creative content, and early previews of this podcast and my other one, I've Never Read Discworld. Or you can check out my fantastic novel, Occupied, by Andy Luke on Amazon, which is a result of about 4 or 5 years' work. It's a situation comedy set within the Occupy movement in Belfast. And don't forget to check out shpcomics.com across the web. It was a fantastic interview. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. And I'll see you all next month, hopefully. Thank you.